Sounds good. For anybody who's a new visitor to us, my name is Lauren, and I'm the gallery director here. I'm just going to give you an overview about how everything's going to work, as most of you already know. First off, as a disclaimer, we're new to this too, so there might be hiccups along the way. Just play along. Your mics will be muted the whole time to reduce any chatter or background noise, but you can feel free to wave or something at the screen if you have a very long question for the artist, or you can type it into the chat box that is to the right of your screen. We have a few questions that have already been submitted ahead of time, and Susie will read them off and he will answer it appropriately. We're just encouraging everybody to have all their videos on so we can see you, but you may leave them off if you decide. If everything goes according to plan, we should be able to watch this later. So hopefully everything goes smoothly. I'll give it over to Susie to introduce John, and I'm going to get set up out front.
Okay, so thank you everyone to our very first virtual opening, as we're trying to figure out what all that means. I'm Susie, I'm the gallery owner if you haven't met me before, and I'm pleased to introduce John here in just a minute. John's been representing the gallery for over 6 years, and but I've known him for quite a while, since he was my professor at Coe, and so we have a little bit longer history together. And he taught at Coe for 37 years before retiring, and now he's working as an artist full-time. And he does various mediums in clay, sculpture, three-dimensional design. His artworks have been shown in exhibitions throughout the country, and he has been a recipient of numerous awards, commissions, and grants. We're pleased to have him in our community in Cedar Rapids, especially as, you know, with this connection with the Ceramic Center. And his studio is located in the historic Cherry Building downtown. And so I think, Lauren, are you set up yet? I got to unmute you.
Okay, John, I think we're handing it over to you.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you all for tuning into this. This is sort of an experiment in real time. My experience with these gallery talks is that they work best when I'm able to address the issues and questions that you might have about the work rather than mine. So my plan here is to say a few brief words and then turn it over to questions. Before we get into that, I just wanted to take a moment to thank Susie, Lauren, and Linda for doing this, for inviting me to show in the first place. And the installation is absolutely fantastic. It's a beautiful installation, beautifully done. And then for making the effort to go online with this. This is creating new ground and plowing new ground. And you know, it may be the wave of the future for galleries for the foreseeable future, and so I applaud them for making the effort to do this and doing such a good job with it. So with that, a few remarks about the work. This work in here is probably, all of it is work that I've done over the past year or so. The oldest of the works are probably some of these shard pieces that you will see in the gallery, and the newest are works that are just recently completed. These 5 larger vessels that you see, as well as some of what we've come to term the concrete pieces that are on the wall for paintings. The show is divided between pieces on the wall and pieces that sit on the floor, either as sculptures or vessels. All of the work is created with clay that's been fortified and stabilized with a variety of different types of binders, depending upon the application. In some cases, acrylic binders, other cases, oil binders, and in other cases, asphalt as a binder. All of that basic clay material is then mixed with and added to and working with other materials to create the kinds of expressions that I'm hoping to get out of each different work. So materials vary. Materials range from concrete to gold leaf and almost everything in between, depending on the particular piece. The purpose of bringing all these materials together in this way and working both on the floor and on the wall is to try to create works that have a certain quietness and stability on the one hand, and at the same time have enough visual activity in them that will entice you to explore them further, that will attract you to them, to let you perhaps wander around inside of the intricacies of the surface plane or the form. And in that process, perhaps lose yourself a little bit, take yourself out of your daily routine, and allow yourself to just kind of wander in the moment. And wonderful things can happen when you're able to do that. That's my opening words. And so at this point, I'm happy to open it up to questions, and I'll do my best to answer them for you.
I'm going to take a minute to just observe the gallery in space, and maybe just like a very quiet few minutes, and then Susie, you can read any questions that come along.
Okay.
All right.
Lauren, while you're doing that, do you want to have John describe the mediums and the more details about each piece as we walk around?
I think maybe a silent viewing just to see them at first, and then we can kind of go over that in a minute.
Well, I'm happy to talk about anything that you want. So let me know.
This one's hard to see, sorry guys.
Lots of reflection on that one.
Hi, I'm seeing people commenting that they can only see Susie. I will try to make some chatter so I show up in your video.
Thank you.
Thank you for playing along, people. Getting used to it.
I can give the titles of each of these.
Oh, sure. That would be great, actually, if you give the titles of them.
This particular piece is from the Horizon Suite of 6 pieces that I did. This one's entitled Horizon Suite Mara Night.
What's this material right up top that's very reflective?
Right in here?
Yeah.
It's a mirror.
Okay.
It's been embedded into the clay.
This one's probably my favorite one in the show.
I like that piece too. That's entitled Without Sound.
And this one's got this lovely reflection at the top.
One of the things I like about this, it's got the top is covered in gold leaf. And so with the lighting, which is really nice, it gives this nice golden reflection onto the wall behind it.
I've got a note here that to just speak up just a tad bit more.
Okay.
Can you talk about this really big guy? Sorry, I'm gonna flip the camera, guys.
This is a sculpture entitled Balance and Light. It was, the idea was to take what I had been doing with these shard pieces, which were cast concrete into, casting shards into cast concrete. They were limited in size and scale, and I wanted to try to do something, and could play with light. So in addition to the shards and the clay, and the concrete, there are a number of plexiglass tubes and rods that go both from the top and the bottom. It's an exercise in balance and light.
All right.
This piece is entitled Nightfall.
You use nightfall a couple of times in your work.
I know.
Is there a particular reason?
Well, I give a lot of thought to the titles. All of the work, this is all very abstracted work. especially the work on the walls, obviously. And so the titles are a way to perhaps provide an entrance for the viewer to get into the work and maybe appreciate a little bit about what's going on. They're not meant to be overly descriptive. They're meant to maybe convey some of the emotional qualities that one might, or visual qualities that I might want to see come from the work. And Nightfall is, for me, it's suggestive of a quiet time in the day. That sort of point between when the sun's going down and the stars are starting to come out a little bit. It's evening.
I can see a couple of questions. Susie, do you want to read some of those off? Because I can't fully see them.
So Jillian had asked, could you say more about what it means to get lost in your work, specifically like such an important time for the consolation of that art can bring? I've been wondering if that's been on your mind given the context of the exhibition and under such circumstances.
Can you repeat that?
One more time.
Okay, can you say more about getting lost in your work?
Yeah, sure. This idea of getting lost it's the best way to describe it. It's maybe a metaphor for the idea of losing oneself, getting out of oneself. When we can fully engage in an activity where we lose our self-consciousness, we lose our sort of the way we're tethered to our daily lives. When we're able to sort of untether and just let ourselves drift a little bit, I think very interesting things happen in our minds and in our sort of overall systems. And so one of the ideas in all of this work is to sort of provide vehicles for that to perhaps happen. This piece is another Horizon Suite piece titled Between Day and Night.
Leslie Wright says, untethered is a great word.
Thank you, I like it.
When do you decide, when deciding to make new works, how do you decide between wall work or works in the round?
That's a good question. I have, I see the work as all related to one another. But the fact of the matter is that we perceive work that's on the wall in a different way than we perceive objects that are on the floor. We just relate to them differently. We come to understand them differently. So as an artist, I can say things, so to speak, I can communicate things of a different sort in pieces that are on the wall than work that's on the floor. We come to appreciate vessels, especially larger vessels, and I like the idea of bringing scale to these because we tend to relate to them more as singular objects in the world that we relate to almost on the scale of a person. So we relate to them that way in a different way than we relate to something very small. But we apprehend a three-dimensional object on the floor in a different way. That is, we walk, to understand it completely, we have to walk around it. So we're not just looking at it with our eyes, we're looking at it with our body, so to speak. We're feeling the piece. We can appreciate textures. We can look at profiles from a distance, get up close and look at textures. With pieces that are on the wall, we've been trained since we were children to see things that are on the wall as windows into sort of more infinite variety of space receding back into space. And so when we look at something on the wall, we understand it in a different way than we understand something on the floor. It's just what we bring to the way we perceive. We're perceiving more with our eyes and less with any of our other senses, our haptic senses. That's why in a lot of these pieces, what I find interesting to do is to put something more dimensional up on the wall So the viewer is inclined to move around it in a way that they might move around something on the floor. But at the same time, get perhaps lost in the surfaces, explore the surfaces and the sort of various planes and the visual devices that might lead the viewer back into space in a way that one might typically see in something, in a painting or a drawing or a print. I hope that answers your question. It may be a little long-winded, I apologize.
When do you know when the work is finished?
When it dries?
You know, I sometimes I know right away. It just feels, I mean, with every piece I make, I start with a general idea of what I want to get out of it. And then what inevitably happens is that as I'm working on the piece, I respond to the materials as the materials are responding to me. And very often the piece takes on a different character, it changes. It evolves, and in the end, it becomes something different than maybe what I had originally intended. That's all for the good. I mean, there's something, that's one of the remarkable things about the creative process for me is that it's very unpredictable. There's always uncertainty, and learning to live with that uncertainty, I think, is a good thing. So when I finish a piece, or when I think I'm done with a piece, I just basically live with it for a while. And after a certain period of time, it just feels right to me, and I come to the conclusion that there's nothing more I can do to make it better. I can maybe make it different. But I've come to the conclusion that that's about all I can do, and it's done, and I feel I'm able to communicate what it is I want. In other cases, I'll just keep a piece around, and it doesn't feel complete. There's something not quite right. And I have to sort of force myself not to try to rush it to completion. I mean, one of the things I've learned over the years is to let these pieces sort of talk to me over time, and over time, maybe I'll wake up in the middle of the night and a piece will come to mind. That's what I need to do. I need to add this little dot of color up in this corner. It's all it needs, and it's done. So I live with them until those sort of moments occur. And very often when I'm working on a series, I won't complete any of the pieces in the series. I'll leave them all almost at the point of completion until the right frame of mind strikes, or I'm at a point where I think, okay, now I understand what I'm doing with these, and I'll just go from piece to piece to piece to piece and just finish one, finish another, finish another. And it sort of ties that group together.
Zach has asked, do you react to the work as you create, or do you have a loose plan?
Well, I always start with a plan. I have a sketchbook where I write down ideas, I make sketches, I make notes, I sometimes collage in pictures of other things. So every piece starts with a general idea, and usually a general idea about what I want to get out of the work, what sort of emotional quality I wanted to have, what general visual qualities I wanted to have. In some cases, I need, depending on the complexity of the piece, to sort of plan out the architecture of the piece. So I need to give that some forethought. But inevitably, once I start putting things together, things happen that are unexpected. The clay dries in a way I hadn't expected, or the relationship between a texture and two materials reveals something to me that I hadn't anticipated. So I've always felt that sort of making art is the ultimate in problem solving. You move from moment to moment, and everything you do sets in motion, everything you add to an image sets in motion a whole set of circumstances that you then have to look at and decide, well, all right, what does it ask for now? What does it need now? And then eventually you do reach this point where you say, I'm done.
I'm going to take a minute here. We got the 10-minute warning, and I'm going to just walk around just for a second, maybe transition to the stage where there's more work, and let a few more questions come through, and then we'll just wrap it up with our 10-minute window, okay?
Okay, I got a couple more questions queued up. Just let me know when you want me to run them.
Sure, give me 1 minute. I love the cracks in this one.
Well, thank you.
Is there a way that you build these where you intend the crack to occur?
Well, I'm coming to learn now how to control these materials. I mean, these aren't, you should know, these aren't fired in the kiln. These are simply dried and clay doing what it naturally does when it dries. And I've come to learn over time that the various proportions of the mix between clay and concrete and the binder that I'm using, depending on what that is, I can create larger cracks or small cracks. So, but in the end, I can't control the cracking. It goes where it's going to go. And that's one of the sort of wonderful parts of working this way.
Therese wants to see John next to the pieces for scale. There we go. They are very large.
It's a good question. Scale is important. It is very important.
All right, we can fire away some more questions.
Don wants to know when you decided to use concrete in addition to clay.
That's a good question. Well, I've used concrete in a number of different ways. In the vessels, the concrete is mixed with the clay, and it keeps the clay. I'm using a clay that would crack excessively. I'm using a red art powdered clay. And by itself, mixed with the binder, the cracking would be excessive. The concrete slows or minimizes the cracking, depending on the percentage of concrete to clay. That's one of the ways I can control the cracking. It also adds strength and stability when it dries. And so the pieces are very solid. Not as heavy as you might think they'd be. The concrete that's used in the wall pieces, and this piece is entitled Evening. After having done these shard pieces for a period of time, making three-dimensional objects, I really like what happens sometimes when concrete was cast into a flat form, along with other materials embedded into it. And there's something about that both smooth surface and a kind of rich surface where I can embed shard, these are cast flat, upside down basically, and so there are shards and bits of material, stones and sand that are on the surface. They're cast into it, and then it's pulled out of there, and then other materials are added on, powdered pigments to create subtle shadings, paper is collaged on fabric, and then just paint in various areas or drawing in different areas to complete the image, add some complexity to the surface.
Linda had asked, are there significant reasons, technically or conceptually, that you choose in the combination of materials, such as the glass and concrete or the gold leaf and the pigments?
I've gained a variety of experiences. This particular piece is called Nightfall. I've gained some experience with a whole variety of materials over the years. And so as I'm working on a piece, I feel like I've got a toolbox of different materials that I can pull from. If I need a subtle sort of shading that a powder pigment can give me, I know where to go for that. If I need if I feel the piece needs a linear element, maybe I'll use, like in this particular piece, this is highly polished thicker plexiglass. Or I wanted a kind of very cold surface right here, which is a piece of steel, which has been glued onto the piece. Or a linear element that's very minimal, put in those wires which are stretched very tautly. So the choices I make are choices which, like I said, I feel like I've got this toolbox of various techniques and materials that I can draw from depending on what the piece itself calls for. Good question.
Mary Zarin had asked, she saw the show yesterday when she was in, your sensitivity to materials blows her mind. I know you meditate. How does that affect your work?
That's an interesting question. I do. I have a meditation practice, which I've been involved in a daily practice for a number of years now. Um, I don't get, meditation doesn't reveal ideas to me necessarily, but it helps keep my mind clear, I think. And it helps me understand the idea of stillness a little bit better.
Very nice. We have about 3-ish minutes, 3.5 minutes left. Anything else? Any other questions?
This is horizon, sweet water, and sky. And here, clay has been mixed with oil binders and some oil paints to create a wash. Here, clay is mixed with an acrylic binder to create a clay surface, as is this. And then clay mixed with, again, the oil binder, but in a thicker form to create this sort of clay-y, sandy surface.
All right, I saw a couple questions come in. We have a 4-minute mark, so.
2-minute mark. Marcia says, talk about how the travels to Africa influenced your work.
It's a good question. Had a profound influence. Landscapes have always been interesting to me, and we have a place in Canada where we have a dock that looks out with a pure west view, and so the sunsets have been spectacular over the years, and that's influenced some of the work that I did. And then we had this opportunity to go to Africa, where my son and his wife were stationed working for the government. And just getting out into the vastness of the Serengeti, where there is space everywhere. It's just phenomenal. And the sky, at night, the sky is everywhere. The peaks Mara night, we were on the Masai Mara, and so that's where the title for this particular piece came from. It's, maybe more than anything, it was the vastness of the space, both on the land and in the sky. That was just incredible. And I think in these horizon pieces, it was this relationship between the way the sky met the land, or in reference to the Canada images that I talked about, the sunsets, the way the sky met the water. There's something just really interesting that happens dynamically between those two forces of the sky and the land and the water where they meet. There's a lot of energy right in that line that's created. And so that's trying to get at it.
We've got less than a minute. Paul says, last question, where do you see the next area of your exploration?
That's a really good question. I wish I had a really good answer. I don't know. I'm just, right now, I'm just taking a little bit of time away from the studio, working on my yard, working in my garden. And we'll get back to the studio in time. I have to live with this work. It's nice to be in the gallery and see the work together, because I can understand it a little bit better and decide where I want to go next. But that's a good question.
All right, I think we're just about out of time. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and John for doing the talk.
And one last thing, I was hoping to have time to do this before the 40 minutes cut off, but I wanted to thank Lauren and Susie and Linda for giving me this opportunity and putting this together. I also wanted to thank all of you who tuned into this at dinner time. I really appreciate your making the effort to do it. I hope you got something out of it. I would encourage any of you, if you found anything of interest in this, to call down to the gallery and make an appointment to come in. They're very good. It's a very clean and sanitized environment. and they never let in more than one or two people at a time. But they do make appointments for people that are interested. I'd encourage you to come down and explore the pieces in person. I think they perhaps might be more meaningful in that context. Again, thank you, and look forward to seeing you all somewhere at some point. Thank you.